Hi, everybody. David Nour back with you for another episode of the Sales Community's Tech Sales Insights Live. I'm here with my co-host, Randy Seidl. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Nour. How's it going?
Great, thanks. And we've got an old friend in Keegan Riley. Hello, Keegan.
Nour, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
I'm great. It's great to have you. And what a great podcast this morning. And let me start. Congrats to you and the Sysdig team for, I guess, a new round announced this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an exciting day at Sysdig. We announced our most recent round of funding. We took $188 million in new investment at a $1.2 billion valuation. So it's an exciting milestone for the company.
So, Seidl, are you starting a Unicorn Friends Club or something?
I know he's buying drinks next time we connect. That's what I know.
Between I think Peter McKay and Bill Hogan, and we got several.
Yeah, so you got to watch out. Every time you go on the list people off, then we get dinged for who we forgot.
Right, but the group of unicorn friends are absolutely growing.
Well, it's like the Seidl coaching tree. It's like the Parcells coaching tree where we've all worked for him at some point at some company, and we learned from the best. So
that's awesome. So Keegan, start with a little about your background and tell us a little about Sysdig.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career as an engineer. At one point, I've had three ultimate goals in my life, and I failed at the first two. The first one, I wanted to be an NFL football player. I thought that was going to happen when I was in high school and for the first 2 years of college. Turns out there's not too many slow, fat white guys playing defensive line in the NFL. So I abandoned that. And my second goal was to be an engineer. I thought I was going to be this entrepreneur that started a tech company. I grew up in the Bay Area, and I very, very quickly, much faster than I gave up on the NFL dream, realized that I'm pretty good at talking about tech, but I'm not very good at creating tech. So then I shifted into sales, and my third kind of ultimate goal was to be a tech executive, a sales leader at a tech startup, and so that one stuck. And so over the past 20 years or so, I started in data storage and proper enterprise sales, and that's how Seidl and I know each other. I worked for him at one point at HP. I was part of a group called Lefthand Networks, and we were part of HP. And I heard you speak at one point back in the days. I won't give years because I don't want to age any of us, but. And then I did a company called Nimble Storage. I joined them in 2012 when they were just crossing $10 million in revenue as a senior director. And over the course of 5 years, as we grew, all boats rise with the tide when you're growing that quickly. And I ultimately ended up being the VP of Americas for Nimble Storage. We were acquired by HPE. So I left HP to go to Nimble, and then I was acquired by HPE. So it kind of bookended the experience. And then I spent a year leading North America data storage for the combined portfolio, 3PAR and Nimble and what have you. That was a great experience. I learned a ton. It was a big team and a really, really fascinating year for me. But ultimately, I wanted to get back to building a company. And our CEO from Nimble spent half that year sitting on a beach in the Maldives somewhere. For those 6 months, I hated him. For the next 6 months, he was an entrepreneur in residence at Accel. Ping Lee from Accel was on our board at Nimble, and Ping is also on the board at Sysdig. And so, Suresh became the CEO of Sysdig. Our founder, Loris Dejiani, who is a brilliant, brilliant man, a legend in the open source community and a technologist, wanted to bring on sort of a business-minded CEO, and he moved to the CTO role. And so when Suresh joined, he called me, and about just over 3 years ago, I joined Sysdig, and it's been a fun ride. We are a company that does secure DevOps. So we enable our customers to confidently run containers, Kubernetes, and cloud services in this new cloud-native application development world.
Seidl, Keegan has got a really interesting story of working for a startup that then HP acquires, then he leaves, and HP acquires another one back. And have you seen a lot of that, of really sharp sales reps, managers that worked for you over the years go join a startup and then kind of see a successful exit, and kind of the ecosystem kind of keeps going?
Yeah, and then rinse and repeat. And fortunately, Keegan's done a great job at that. So once you get kind of tagged with that pedigree, whether it's at a CRO level or CEO level, just kind of keep going. I guess a question I'd have for kind of Lefthand and Nimble, and you can be honest, did you get kind of lucky that they happened to kind of work out so well, or do you kind of intentionally say and think and feel, okay, hey, this is something I can do well?
Yeah, I think it's more luck than skill. I'll be honest about it.
That's honesty.
Yeah, and Lefthand, I wasn't a part of that company in the early startup phase. I joined as kind of a frontline manager as they were being acquired by HP. And HP did a good job sort of leaving it alone and for that first year, and we ran it in a very entrepreneurial fashion and made that product line successful. But I was on the front lines of that company, so I was a bit of a cog in the machine in some ways. When I went to Nimble, that was the first I heard of Nimble was from one of our SEs in Southern California. And I said, I keep hearing this company's name. What's the story? There's at that time, this is 2011, there were 592 companies that were startups that had flash storage and optimized for virtualization in their deck. And it was really hard to figure out which ones were going to go and which ones weren't. It was not obvious who was going to be the winners in that space. But I just remember hearing, man, everywhere we see them, the customers are really happy with the product. And more importantly, they're really happy with the support experience. They're doing something special with InfoSight. And so that was the first kind of teaser for me. And when I talked to them, what really sort of hooked me was the culture of the organization. There's a reason that I've now, considered Suresh a mentor and a friend for 8-9 years now. He built a great culture there, and that was really the key to our success. And I was just lucky to be a part of it.
Keegan, one of the things I was really fascinated by in our podcast interview this morning, and by the way, thanks for Eric and Alexander jumping in. We appreciate your comments. I would encourage the audience to also jump in with your questions of both Keegan Riley and Randy Seidl. But Keegan, you seemed really focused on, and your aperture seems really tight on environments where you believe your DNA will succeed.
Yeah.
Talk about some of those attributes first. And then I'm really curious, how did you get there? How did you figure out this is the type of environment where I'm going to be able to show up at my best, be at my best, and deliver great results?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're spot on. I mean, I think that is the most important thing to me, both professionally and personally, right? I just, the way that I tend to think about things, I've got a growth mindset. I really enjoy challenges. I really enjoy building things, and I've got sort of a genuine appreciation for building relationships. And I think you've got to know yourself. Right. And I've always been, I've strived to be self-aware, both on the positive side and the negative side. I know what I'm good at. And I also know there's many, many things that I'm not so good at. And I know what my personal values are. And I think, there's no right answer on this, but it's really important. And I think cultural fit sometimes gets a little bit misunderstood to mean, people, I want to work with people that look like me or think like me or, drink the same beer that I drink or whatever. And that's, to me, not what it's about. To me, what it's about is, all right, as a person, my core values and what brings me joy in my life have to align with the company's values. And at Sysdig, I'll use that as an example. Our 3 core values are love our customers. You've got to put your customer at the center of every decision that you make and every interaction. 2 is trust in the team. You've got to find people that are trustworthy, not just from sort of an integrity perspective, but also from a meritocracy perspective. I want to know that the people that are in this organization with me are really good at their job, and I can trust them to do their job, and they can rely on me to do my job. And then the 3rd is dig deeper, which is our way of thinking about having a gritty approach to life, having passion for pursuing long-term goals, and having the ability to persevere over long periods of time, even when things get tough, right? Because building startups is not for the faint of heart. It's not all, today's a great day for us. We love, announcing unicorn status and things like that. But it's amazing how 3.5 years of grinding can make you look like an overnight success, right? So you've got to have that ability to kind of keep your eye on the prize and structure your approach in a way that'll help you achieve those things. So that's the way I think about it from a personal career management perspective.
Love it. Seidl, you and I meet a lot of leaders who, good people, good intended people, somehow end up in the wrong job or regrettably in the wrong company. What are the biggest mistakes you see really competent leaders make in jumping to a new ship where it's just not a right fit?
Yeah, I think Keegan mentioned about the grass being greener, and although I've got a recruiting business, the first thing I say when people say, "Oh, hey, Randy, I'm looking," and I'll say, number one rule is the grass is not always greener. Take a look at where you are. What is it that you don't like? And too many times it's just wacky that people are just kind of emotional. And I'll say, well, no, let's go through. What is it that you don't like, or you wish you could fix? If you could wave your magic wand, what would you like? Okay, well, talk to your boss about this. Talk to so and so about this, and marketing about that. Try and fix where you are, as opposed to just kind of pulling the ripcord, because to a certain degree, devil is better than devil that you don't know.
So, Keegan, one of the challenges with technology CEOs is, the perception is, I know how to do this. It sounds like Suresh, and I don't know him, but it sounds like he's a little different in that he valued what you did in the previous role and brought you in. Talk about some of those CEO attributes, maybe top 2 or 3 that are really attractive to a rock star sales leader that says, I want to go work for that guy. I want to go through the wall to help him succeed from a sales, from a revenue generation side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, if a person has reached a point in their career where they're entrusted with that title, right, where they're the CEO of a well-backed startup, they're probably highly intelligent and pretty good at their job, right? And so the functional expertise of kind of how they built their career, it's sort of an ante to the poker game that they're going to know that really, really well. And generally speaking, they're all going to be pretty smart, pretty high IQ. So I think those are things that are important, but somewhat table stakes. What I appreciate about Suresh and about some of the other CEOs that I've worked for is there's a humility and a growth mindset that comes with the best of the best, right? I think a lot of people plateau at a certain point because they stop getting better. And the best CEOs and the best executives that I've ever worked with, you can tell that they embrace debate and they embrace learning from people and they embrace diverse points of view and new input to help themselves continue to evolve, continue to get better. Tech moves really, really fast. It is not a static environment. And so, what got us to today is not what's going to get us to tomorrow. And so the best, I think the thing that I look for is this person open-minded? Do they have a growth mindset, despite the fact that they're probably much, much smarter and more experienced than me? Do they value my input, and can I be additive to the organization and to the culture? And then how do they align the company behind a vision? How do you ensure that everyone knows where we're going directionally, but as you scale and you bring people on, you give people the freedom and the authority and the autonomy to make decentralized decisions and trust that it aligns with where we're all going.
So Seidl, let me flip the coin and ask you, you serve as an advisor, investor, a lot of tech, hyper growth tech companies. What are the top 2, 3 big mistakes those technical founders, those technical CEOs make?
Yeah, I could probably come up with a lot more, but I think a lot of times they don't, they're kind of engineering centric. They think they know sales and they don't. So the best ones are, if you're going to stereotype, typically it's technical engineering centric, like has happened with Sysdig. But then they'll kind of bring in then the right sales resources. They'll say, I don't know sales, so let me bring in the right resource. Let me empower them. Let's make it happen. And then when and if things get into difficulty, a lot of times those tech CEOs are not authentic. they say, oh, it's just sales, as opposed to look in the mirror and say, hey, well, it is the product, product market fit, it's the positioning, it's the market, kind of things like that come into play. I think
almost like blind spots based on what they know versus what they may not be fully aware of.
Right. And then when it comes time to, at the board meeting, numbers are off. Why? Okay, boom, there goes the CRO. That's why I don't know what the exact stats are, but, CRO, tech CROs are probably, 18 months, plus or minus for, longevity, if that.
Why are you making Keegan so nervous? I mean, he's
fine. He's great. They've got a great partnership. He's got a great CEO, does fantastic at his role.
I love it.
It is true, though. I mean, it is, I think, I've seen that same metric that 18 months is the average tenure of a CRO at a tech company, at a startup.
That's amazing. So, Keegan, obviously the title of our podcast episode was this idea of platform shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Just briefly talk about, you brought up VMware, you brought up now Kubernetes. Talk about these platform shifts and why they're so important in the tech space.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very young, so I haven't seen too many of them. Seidl has been around for a really long time, so he's seen a lot of them. Just kidding, Randy.
I'm not that much older.
No, I think, the last, I think this happens, if you look historically, it happens pretty often. And the last big platform shift was brought about by VMware, right? And so it was a shift from, physical servers and a stack where you had a server for your Oracle database on top of, a router and storage and so on and so forth. And it was very physically oriented. VMware came about. Virtualization was this massive platform shift, and it created this ecosystem in which companies were born because of that platform shift. Obviously, everybody understands that VMware became VMware because of virtualization, but you've got companies like Veeam who reinvented backup for virtualization. You've got companies like Nutanix that kind of capitalized on virtualization and created this hyper-converged infrastructure category and so on and so forth. So there's always companies that thrive on this platform shift.
Almost like a ripple effect.
Yeah, exactly. Because legacy tooling breaks down when you've got a new platform. And so the platform shift that we're capitalizing on is this shift from kind of a waterfall approach to application development to a world of microservices architectures, continuous integration, continuous deployment, DevOps and DevSecOps, and a new way of writing cloud native applications. And cloud native application development means that you have to fundamentally rethink your tooling. And specifically, we're seeing a convergence of observability tools and security tools. And that's our premise. We believe that this platform will help you run your containers, Kubernetes, and cloud estate.
So translate that to one of my love-hate relationships in the tech space is we kind of eat a lot of our own cooking and we love all of our own stuff.
Of course.
Translate this to the end client. How is Humana? How is Bank of America? How is Schneider Electric better off because of what Sysdig brings to the table?
So I think, fundamentally, all of these companies are now shifting to thinking of themselves as a tech company. I'll use Goldman Sachs as an example because they're one of our largest customers. They're also an investor, and they're a public reference. So you can go hear their whole story if you go to our website. But Goldman Sachs competes for talent with Facebook and Apple. They consider themselves a technology company. They have over 20,000 developers on staff, right? Because the applications that they write are the product to their customers. You can take your money anywhere, but their algorithms and their applications and the way they handle data is core to, them being who they are. And so, when you move outside of sort of a four walls on-prem data center and move into this highly fragmented environment where, you could just as easily have a developer sitting on a laptop in Starbucks working on sensitive financial information as having someone, inside of four walls, you have to rethink how you protect that information. And that's what we are uniquely positioned to help them do.
There's a big movement of the low code or no code where I can use modular. Does that bolster Sysdig's success, or does that potentially threaten it?
No, it bolsters it. I mean, we want to make things easy, right? We want to make it easy for these companies to basically shift left with everything that they think about, so that when you're building these applications, regardless of how you build them, you embed security into the code. It's not an afterthought. It's core to how you build the applications. They are secure when they go live.
Seidl, what I was fascinated by conversation with Keegan on Kubernetes, it seems like it's a really interesting new technology that kind of gets momentum. Can you think of others, or are you seeing other spaces that you're either intrigued by, or you see that it's got that platform ecosystem shift kind of opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, one would be artificial intelligence, right? So that's data robots, a client that I'm helping a lot, and just the value propositions that artificial intelligence is able to bring. I mean, it's really CEO level discussions all around how you can help improve revenue, efficiency, supply chain, sales, intelligence, and it's certainly going to be a huge growing field. And then going back with Keegan's comment talking about VMware, I think VMware is probably one of the best that they came in with their entry point of virtualizing servers, but then under Pat Gelsinger since moved on back to Intel, but they just kind of did an amazing job every year reinventing themselves, or every 2 years, right? Some it's a lot of companies kind of end up say dying off, but they got sold, but they're able to continue to reinvent and go and grow, keeping really ahead and leading the market.
Love it. Let's go to a question. We got a question from Mike, and then I want to build on something with Seidl.
All right, great. And then also, Keegan, I don't know if you saw, Jesse commented that said, I guess it's actually 14 months, not 18 months. So it's going down. It's going down, not up.
Terrifying.
There you go. That was not my phone, Nour. Just
sorry about that.
That's all right, no problem. He always gets upset with me for something.
I know.
Anyway, so from Mike, thanks, Mike. Nice picture there. Keegan, how will organizations change with automation? What jobs could we automate in the sales process and optimize our rev teams?
Yeah, great question. And I think, I'll give you somewhat of a stock answer on automation. The things you want to automate are the things that smart people don't want to do, right? So the minutia of the job, as much as possible. I mean, this is why UiPath had such a spectacular IPO last week. This RPA space is or RPO space is really, really hot, and I think it does apply to the sales process in some of the tool sets that we're using. So for example, we use Clary, and we use Gong. Those are two very, very crucial pieces of our tech stack because they help automate some of the insight, and they take out some of the emotion of committing a deal and calling a number, and they just look at hard data. So I have a Clary score and a Gong score on every single deal, right? We have the ability to kind of sort feedback on keywords and go listen to recordings in Gong and things like that. So automating a lot of the enablement portion, the process portion, the CRM scrubbing portion has been really, really helpful for us. And I think it's a key to our success in a post-COVID world when everything sort of shut down and went remote. You can't get together for live QBRs. And so you've got to, and we're highly distributed. We've got people in many, many countries. You've got to be able to work asynchronously. And so you've got to have good data and you've got to have consistent processes. And there's a lot of tools out there that help us with that.
Well, that's great. On the, I was just thinking a question. I know you're big on kind of the sales methodologies. Can you talk a little bit there in terms of kind of what you use in terms of best practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that we've embraced is command of the message out of a company called Force Management and MedPick as a qualification framework. And command of the message is all about, it's consistent with sort of the love our customers core tenet that we have. Command of the message is all about not just showing up, dropping your keyboard and demoing your cool technology. It's about embracing a discovery process where you listen first and you understand in this prospect, what's the current state and what are the negative consequences of not doing anything? What's the desired future state and what are the positive business outcomes with reaching that future state? What are the capabilities that are going to be required to make that shift? What are the metrics that they'll use to track success of the project? And then only when you understand that, you can start to connect what we do, how we do it better than our competition, and what are our differentiators. And so that's our methodology when we engage with prospects. And then MEDPIC is, I think everybody is familiar with MEDPIC. It's been around, and it's the gold standard of qualification frameworks.
Keegan, one of the things you and I talked about is the whole talent agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've always believed the best teams win. It is apparent that the market is picking up steam, and not just good enough talent, but exceptional talent is becoming increasingly more difficult to find.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some in roles where you've hired sales reps, sales managers, sales leaders? Talk about predictors in that interview process of their future success. What are you looking for? What has consistently demonstrated that what I saw in our interview is actually exactly what's shown up, and it's the reason this person is really successful?
Yeah, it's such a great question, especially for any hiring manager out there. Even C- sales reps are pretty dang good at selling themselves, right? It's very hard to vet folks in sales, and it's the most important part of the job. If you hire well, then your probability of success goes up exponentially. If you hire poorly, it is impossible to succeed. You cannot be successful if you hire the wrong people. And I think, over the years, I've always looked for patterns, and I've always thought about, what attributes make someone successful. And I believe very fundamentally, it comes down to one key thing, and that's grit. There's a great book written by Angela Duckworth. She's at the University of Pennsylvania. She wrote a book called Grit, and her whole life, her whole research is around studying successful people. And if you read that book, she looks at, people from all walks of life, from Jamie Dimon to Pete Carroll to, cadets at West Point and things like that. And so very different roles, very different backgrounds. And the one thing that's common amongst all these highly successful folks is they have grit. And she defines grit as the combination of passion and perseverance. And that, you can see the roots of that in our dig deeper core tenet. But if you find someone who is just relentless in their desire to pursue success, the people that they can hear no 100 times, and the 101st time, they're going to go right back at that same sale with the same excitement and passion and optimism as the first time, right? And the people that just will not be stopped. If you find that quality in someone, you've hit a home run. And it's rare. There's not that many of them out there. But you find somebody like that, and you can do a lot with it. Now, it can't be the only thing, right? You sometimes, if you get somebody that runs into a brick wall 100 times, and you're like, hey, bud, there's a door right there, then that's probably not going to be good for your business either. So you obviously want to couple that with, a decent IQ, a decent EQ, and a work ethic, and so on and so forth. But grit to me is the number one thing.
Seidl, I remember distinctly in your transformation of HP back in the day, I remember sell everything on the truck. Talk about that grit factor in large organization or small. And more importantly, if somebody doesn't have it, do you believe it can be taught, or is something they're born with, and that tenacity and that drive and that go-get-itness is part of who they are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think everything in sales, you can, if you want to learn, you can. I think certainly that whether you want to call it a killer instinct or the grit and the grind and the excitement, you got to be warped, right? Which we all are, to say, like, every time I hear somebody say no, it's like, great, I'm getting closer to, more no's, I get it. I'm getting closer to yes, right? I mean, you got to be a little twisted, I guess. But
you're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance.
I mean, to a certain degree, yet, I hate to call it blue collar, but even though I have a son at Harvard, the EMC days, we would never hire anybody from the Ivy League. You wanted somebody that were, again, lack of better words, kind of more blue collar, gritty, could do it. Now times have changed a little bit. So, I mean, those are some thoughts. And then just in terms of the hiring factors, one thing is interesting with COVID, relationships are huge. So say if I were looking to hire Keegan, we probably have in common 50 end user customers and probably 100 partners. So say if I didn't know him before, we could say, okay, great. I know I can spot check, pick whatever number, a lot, pick 5 or 10 that all say great things. The kind of C- players typically don't have that. And when you go to check out the references with people that they know, then you get kind of a thumbs down or a mediocre feedback there. And then during COVID, for those that have relationships, I think they've done great. But then for those that don't, like in sales community, we've got lots of great content. But one of the more popular areas is remote selling. So there's lots of things if you're younger or changing industries or companies or who you're selling to. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do. If you don't have the relationships, and if you want, go check that out in sales community.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just to add on that, I think, one thing I've always admired about Randy Seidl is you may be the most well-connected person in the industry. If someone's not connected with you, right, then that's probably a pretty bad sign. And I think, what I've learned from you is, careers are long. Right. And so I think the other advice I give folks is do not be short-sighted, right? Protect your relationships, do the right thing by people, and foster positive relationships, because at some point, somebody's going to ask somebody about you without your knowledge, and you're going to have a brand. And whether you know it or not, you've got a brand, and somebody's going to, share the truth about you. So it's important to be authentic in how you build those relationships.
I gotta share this from Jeff. I love this. Jeff Lidman, good old HP days. Not only sell everything on the truck, but Seidl would tell people, sell the truck too. So we don't need the truck. We'll find another one. Sell the truck too.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Rich Napolitano, who I work for at Sun, was actually came up with it. So I always give him credit. SEAT, sell everything on the truck. But the idea is if you're at a company where you're kind of multiple things you can sell, you always have the path of least resistance. Everybody goes to sell the one thing as opposed to saying, hey, let's sell everything else. So it's kind of an obvious thing. But Nour, back on the relationships, I know from relationship economics that Keegan and I are both disciples of. But relationships, you point out and say frequently, it's not just relationships because they're buddy know them, but there's an aspect of kind of adding value that ties into that for long-term relationships, right?
Absolutely. And to build on what both of you said, if you think of your reputation in the market, it's coming from the value you create for others. So Seidl and Keegan brought it up. It's not that a lot of people. It's any of the people that we call or we talk to, they just speak so highly of their interactions, of their value creation with you, of I was doing this and here's what Seidl did to help me. I was, in this job or in this company and Seidl connected me with somebody. So again, you both have read relationship economics. I talk about this idea of relationship currency deposits. Those are the investments you make in your relationships that set you apart from everybody else who doesn't. So a lot of people think of, I'm very good at what I do. That's table stakes. That's kind of the minimum level of requirement to succeed. It's the connections. It's the value-based connections you absolutely make that sets you apart. And Keegan's exactly right. That long tail value of your credibility, of your repute, of your relationships is what's going to set you apart in every job. And it's amazing how many people we all see who are penny wise and pound foolish, or they cut their nose to spite their face, or I'm going to get this deal done for this quarter, but now I've poisoned that relationship for months and years to come, right? So we've got a question. Thanks for asking, Randy. We got a question from Jesse.
Jesse, what's your definition of MQL? I guess it's probably not as much, marketing qualified lead, but the subtlety behind the scenes where, marketing says they're giving all this ROI, and most of the time, if I were to generalize, it's a bunch of BS fluff. What's your take?
Who's on the call again? It's all salespeople, right?
Yeah. Not to lead the witness, but
you're
I'm definitely going to say my piece after you talk. So
yeah, exactly. No, I think, listen, I've never worked for a company where sales has said, yeah, marketing is awesome 100% of the time, right? Yeah. It's very easy for us on the sales side to kind of point the finger at marketing and say, we need better leads, we need more leads, so on and so forth. But I think, a marketing qualified lead or an AQL or SQL or whatever, however you want to think about qualification at the top of the funnel, I think the world has changed, right? I mean, my first sales job, I had a cube and a landline and the yellow pages, and I was dialing for dollars. And in today's world, the information is so much easier to access. Right. So the buyer's journey, whereas they used to have to engage with vendors very early in that process to educate themselves about the space and the offerings and so on and so forth. Today, a quick Google search, can yield some pretty great results. And so my view of the relationship between sales and marketing is it becomes much more intertwined, and you have to think about it. I mean, I think this is why my title is Chief Revenue Officer, not Chief Sales Officer, because you've got to think about both pre-sales and post-sales to be successful. And you've got to create this, flywheel effect where you're delivering content to prospects, you're educating them about the space, you're evangelizing, what you do, but you're talking about the value drivers that will bring them to the point of being ready to engage. And you don't want to be too eager about it. Nobody likes, getting a cold call on something that is not relevant to them, right?
So let me put you on the spot. Do you believe marketing should report up to a CRO?
Does it report to you now?
It does not, and I don't know that there's a right answer to it. It's a bit of a cop-out to say that, but I think it depends on the organization and it depends on the people. We happen to have a brilliant CMO at Sysdig, Janet Matsuda, who was also our CMO at Nimble. And Janet and I have such a strong partnership and such a great relationship that it just works. It works for us to be peers and partners in approaching these things. In other organizations, it may not work that way, and you may want marketing to report into a CRO. Or I know some companies are now, how many different acronyms start with C, but there's like chief growth officers and chief customer officers and so on and so forth. But I think ultimately where it's driving to is convergence between the two functions.
Randy, over to you.
Yeah. And then, so tied in there with marketing, I think you may be the exception to the rule, but generally speaking of our friends, I think you'd agree that, kind of sales gets, blamed for everything, right? Okay. When things are great, it's everybody else. Some of the bad, okay, it's on sales.
Yeah.
Going back to marketing, you have, a lot of times, the budgets are so limited, and you look kind of across the side and you say, wow, marketing has, all this budget, they're doing all these programs. And I find one of the biggest failings is that there's really no specific metrics that are tied ROI wise to what they're doing to help the company. Have you seen that or heard that?
Yeah, 100%. I hear it all the time, and it's I'm lucky. That's a core theme of my career, by the way. I'm lucky all the time. I just fall into the right partnerships.
The harder you work, the luckier you get. So
I guess that's fair.
In the EMC always.
But the reason I say I'm lucky is because I've got a CMO who has signed up to S1 and S2 numbers, and is, we hold her and we hold her team accountable for top of funnel and hard quantifiable numbers on top of funnel. In the absence of that, then you're going to walk into every QBR and there's going to be a whole bunch of hand waving and a whole bunch of sort of like, hey, look at this cool stuff that we did over here. Everything is great. Everything is awesome. Why aren't you closing more deals, VP of Sales?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we got these awards for our advertising that we did. Great. So how many leads? How much did that help us sell anything? Right.
Yeah, exactly right.
And for those that don't know, S1, S2, I assume you mean that's sales stage 1, sales stage 2, the funnel.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about trends. For last 14 months, we send 100 million people to work from home. And for many, it's actually worked surprisingly well. We're talking before this on, we're not living our lives on airplanes, and we figured out we maneuvered our capabilities and competencies, and we're not doing trade shows and we don't have demo days. And I think we all can agree we miss that interpersonal interaction. Keegan, my question of you is, as we get vaccinated, as we get on the other side of this pandemic, what are 2 or 3 trends that you believe will stay with us in the post-pandemic kind of tech sales, tech relationship space?
Yeah, no, this is such an important question because, in some ways, I think things were moving in a certain direction, but somewhat slowly. And then all of a sudden, when, everything shut down, it was almost this forced experiment where it was like, all right, we'll see who's ready for this. And I think, in the early days, I'm thinking back to, March and April of last year, I spent a lot of my time having conversations with folks in kind of in peer groups and in networking communities. And by the way, this is, Randy didn't pay me to say this, but this is why something like sales community is so important, because you need to have a community of folks outside of your current company that you can go bounce ideas off in kind of a safe space and understand what's working and what's not working. And one of the first conversations that I had back in those days was with a guy by the name of Mike McBride over at GitLab. He's the CRO over at GitLab. And the reason that I sought out his advice is GitLab has been all remote from day one. They view it as, a feature, not a bug. And if you go to their website, I'd encourage you to go look at how they structure it. They have really leaned into that even pre-COVID. And so learning from them and understanding how they thought about some things was really insightful. And some of the things that we've taken away from it, we've decided that we will continue. This is the new normal for us. Number one, the days of requiring people to be in an office 5 days a week, it's over. Like, we will never ask our people to sit in traffic for an hour and a half in both directions just to come into San Francisco. It doesn't make sense. We've proven that we can be productive remote. So our policy post-COVID, once it's safe to open and with all the caveats around it, our guidance is going to be 2 days a week in the office, because we still value in-person collaboration and sort of, water cooler innovation and things like that. But you don't have to do it 5 days a week. So we'll go to 2 days a week in the office, which, by the way, has allowed us to get a much nicer office. So the new Sysdig office got a 180-degree view of the Bay Bridge, which I'm fired up about. Wow. Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Seidl, I'm thinking we take the tech sales insights on the road.
There we go. Yeah.
Keegan, what are Randy? How about you? What are some of the trends you're seeing that beyond working remote and that you believe are going to stay with us?
Yeah, I don't know about Keegan, but our productivity is, amazing. It may sound goofy, but I think for the longevity of just health-wise, the pace that, most, sales execs and, that are on your, kind of on the road Monday to Friday, you're up early, you're out late for, dinners and wine and kind of everything else. There's going to have some great lasting effects. Keegan in the podcast, mentioned, being around the kids, just kind of the life balance of, that I think is just such a better, a better life. And in Curvebenders, again, didn't get paid to say this, but, Curvebenders, you talk about, remember, it's not life balance. What do you call it?
Work-life blending.
Work-life blending. Yeah. So maybe I'll turn it over to you, because I think that's kind of the definition.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. And it's exactly what the two of you have said. I think this pandemic has recalibrated for many of us what's really important to us. And, everybody tells you, and Seidl's kids are a little older than, mine or maybe Keegan's. Everybody tells you how fast these kids grow up, and you don't believe them until they happen to you. And my daughter just finished her first year at Georgia Tech. I'm pretty convinced we brought her home from the hospital yesterday. So the fact that we had an opportunity to spend this incredible time with our family says, Keegan said it, I'm just not that excited about commuting hour and a half each direction to sit around a cube. I can do that from home and be a lot more productive. By the same token, if I want to leave, my kid plays lacrosse, right? And I'm the penalty scorekeeper at his lacrosse games. I'm going to leave in the afternoon to go do that, and I'll get caught up on email after they all go to bed. Mm-hmm. Or I'll get caught up on email on the weekends. Last weekend, Seidl knows this. He's a big skier. I ride motorcycles. Rode motorcycles with 6-8 CEOs, and over a meal, we had a great conversation about not just how did you get into writing, but by the way, what else do you do? And you have follow-up conversations, and it's really integrating. You don't have a work life and a personal life. You have one life. So the sooner you can figure out how to integrate the two, I think the happier you're going to be. Ken Grow is here. Seidl.
Hey, congrats, Keegan, on the funding round.
Hey, thanks, Ken. Congrats on Luckier. You guys are doing great things over there.
And Jeff jumped in with a comment as well. Marketing's role is changing. Do you agree that from a cost center to a revenue center?
Go ahead, Keegan, then I'll go.
Yeah, I totally agree with it. And again, I think it's the convergence. It's not a distinct silo. It's integrated. I mean, we're all signing up for a number.
And also too, I think it comes to the intelligence of the board, but specifically the CEO. I mean, there are still some CEOs that just don't get it, right? And you say, what are you wasting your money on all this other stupid stuff? You got to tie it to revenue for sure. And then they say, well, it's not, the CRO, wants the marketing report to them, like, well, whatever. It's like, that's, if you can't fix it yourself, but just that whole function on kind of what it is that, what's marketing doing to, provide value of something that's going to move the needle on the revenue side. Absolutely.
So let's talk about channels for a second.
Want to know how I really feel?
Yeah. Otherwise, Seidl's got no opinion about this topic whatsoever. So Keegan, let's talk about channels. We had Cheryl Cook from Dell. We've had Frank Rausch. We've had several really sharp channel executives. I'm not convinced a lot of tech companies really invest in those channel relationships to create that multiplier effect, right? They create that reach. And by the way, a lot of those channel partners have incredible relationships with those end clients. Talk about your lens on channels, and is Sysdig, do you have a channel partner program, and what does channel come in your go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I think it's an evolving topic. When I was at Nimble, we really nailed it out of the gates. We were 100% channel. We didn't do any direct business at all. We had just a well-oiled machine of a channel program. And that was built, by experts in channel. We had Kristen Carnes, who was our first channel chief, and then later Leonard Ivantosh, who has built many successful channels. And we got it right. And I think the key to the success with Nimble is the market was at the right point for that type of a strategy. It was a fairly mature market. It was a well understood motion. And I don't think I fully understood the power of that until I joined Sysdig 3 years ago. We made one run at building channel programs in the early days, but the timing wasn't right. It was just too early. I mean, 3 years ago, container security just wasn't a thing. There wasn't a line item in anybody's budget for it. It was not a well understood purchase. It was, we were at the time selling primarily on-prem software with a massively complicated backend that needed to be installed. I mean, our SEs at the time couldn't even stand up some of our POVs. We had to bring our PS folks in. Vikram is our PS leader, and he's a stud. He has saved us in many, many ways, but it wasn't the right time to build out a channel program. And so we went direct for the first couple of years. We've now, for two reasons. One, we've done a ton of work to simplify the product. We've pivoted hard to SaaS. 80% of my ARR is now SaaS, which is a much better customer experience. And also the market has inflected. So we're now at the point where our partners are building practices around DevSecOps. And so we've made a massive investment. Actually, just Monday, we had our new VP of Worldwide Channels and Corporate Sales join us, Keith Joseph. He joins us from Proofpoint. Keith was one of the kind of founding members of the SHI corporate sales team. He spent time at CDW and Insight. So he's been on the channel side and he's been on the vendor side. And he is going to be a real key to our next chapter, which is heavily invested in channel partnerships.
So Seidl, let me ask you, is there an inherent danger for business models that are 100% channel? You mean you literally have your success in many ways in other people's hands, and you've got to influence them to prioritize you and take you to their relationships, and in many ways sell on your behalf. Is there an inherent risk on that model?
Yeah, I think as you laid it out, yes. But I think Keegan would agree in most cases, you're kind of working the deals yourself. And then, for lack of better words, you're handing them over. So what you're doing is, if it's a large, Wall Street financial services company, it's hard to break in as a new vendor. So you're kind of leveraging somebody else's procurement relationship to have an easier on-ramp to kind of get into that account. And then you're hoping then by showing them that then you could sell this account or that account, then they can kind of go deeper. So I would argue that it's not really, you're not just, singularly dependent on them. It's kind of a tag team effort.
Ken is jumping in with kudos for Suresh.
Huh. Yeah, I was telling him that we're both on your advisory board there for WECA. So, yeah,
that's fantastic. So Keegan, I want to switch gears to aspiring CROs, right? So today I'm a sales manager or sales director, maybe VP of sales. I really want to get to that CRO role. What would you coach me to think about? Maybe prioritize, maybe focus on in that journey from now to next?
Yeah, I keep mentioning luck, but it does involve a certain degree of luck. You've got to find a way to be sort of in the right place at the right time. And you've got to signal, being promoted. I got great advice once from a former boss and mentor. I'll call him out directly, Kevin O'Rourke, who was an area VP for me at EMC. And he was a West Point guy, he was a military guy. And he told a story once about how somebody in his outfit never hung pictures on the walls. And he finally kind of got up the nerve to ask, why don't you have any pictures of your kids or any posters or anything on the office? And he said, because I want my commanding officer to know that if there's a post available anywhere in the world tomorrow, I can be there that day. And it's kind of an interesting story. The point of the story is, getting promoted is not an event. It's a process. And part of that process is making it very clear what your aspirations are, right? And it doesn't mean that you stomp your feet and say, if you don't promote me tomorrow, I'm out of here. But it is, as being on the other side of it, I really appreciate people on my team who say, hey, listen, I want to be a CRO someday. And so if you give me the opportunity to step up and take on some side projects or to grow, or if you give me constructive criticism, that's great, because now I've identified that person as, in my mind, a future CRO who, I can sort of pay it forward, and I can take, Randy's advice to me earlier in my career and Kevin's advice to me earlier in my career and sort of pass that along. We joked about the coaching tree, but it's real, right? And so you look for people to mentor, to help, but you can't find them if they don't self-identify. So if you want to be a CRO, tell everyone you want to be a CRO.
Yeah, and in the case of Keegan, I would say, he uses the word lucky, but the harder you work, the luckier you get, as I mentioned before. But I think he's a student of the game, right? So Keegan's always done a great job over the years being a sponge, kind of learning, developing. And I think in what you said, not just telling everybody that's what you want to do, but saying, okay, what is it that I need to learn, develop? Kind of what are my gaps? What's your advice and feedback? And kind of just thinking, okay, now here's these 5 things I'm working on. Okay, once you get those set, okay, what else? Keep asking more. How can you continue to get go and grow and do well and do great with all these companies, which is fantastic.
I'm also reminded of Jennifer Haas's comment about the 3 ships, right? You need leadership, you need mentorship, you need sponsorship. And for those, not just who but also who knows you and who recognizes your impact and can bring you into opportunities.
Yeah, and it's thinking of a mentorship. I spoke to somebody, Elizabeth, who's a new member, individual contributor in sales at a company, but she's new to sales community. So we had a Zoom this morning, and she's asking a great question. Hey, mentorship, and how do you do it? And what do you do? And I said, well, typically I went, I'm sure Keegan's always done it, is you have kind of a formal process where it's kind of once a month or every 6 weeks or every 8 weeks, you touch base, you have questions, and companies usually kind of put these types of programs in place. She said, well, what if I'm at a company that doesn't have that? And I'm like, well, you just got to kind of do it on your own, right? So you can get mentors that are, at maybe, one that's at your company, get 1 or 2 that's, outside of your company. And if you want to, learn from mentors, you have to drive the agenda. You're not just going to show up and they're going to tell you what to do, how to do it. You can kind of research online, what are questions, but you have to kind of drive that process. So, most companies are big at doing it now across the, diversity perspective, but there's still a lot that are not. So that's, thinking of, Jennifer's ships, mentorship being a big one.
Got a great comment by Jeff about GSIs.
Yeah, global GSIs, global system integrators, I assume, are also key to scaling it exponentially. Plus, the value they bring is they're well branded and have trusted status. Absolutely. We use GSIs to bring us into large enterprise accounts where our reps would not be able to enter due to our company size.
Keegan, you guys work with any GSIs?
We do. And I think, GSIs are at this phase of a startup, they can be a bit of a moonshot. You got to be careful, right? Because you can also, you could spend 12 months chasing a GSI and see zero revenue from them. And then on the 366th day, a $10 million project could materialize. But it's a high beta investment.
Yeah, really hard. And with GSIs, I'd say that's not on a. Sorry, that one was me. It's not on. I almost made it. Usually not on a short list. But if you are going to work with system integrators, figure out who actually owns the account, because otherwise you get totally lost. And even when you get to that person, usually they're worried about all these bigger, better projects. But that's a thought. So Nour, question for you. We're getting toward the end here. So with Curvebenders, you released this week, fantastic. There's so many great nuggets in there. Just thinking any kind of couple things you might share with folks that are kind of on the sales side relative to some of the themes in Curvebenders.
Number one is this, as a small token of appreciation, there's a signed copy on its way to Keegan. Seidl, right? Please don't put it on eBay, right? Please do not turn around and put it on eBay. So it's all about. So Randy, thanks for asking. It was the focus of our conversation last week. I'm excited. This is the launch week. It really is at the intersection of future of work. And the premise is we actually researched 15 forces that we believe are going to continue to create disruption in not just the way we work, but also the way we live, the way we play, and the way we give to others. To remain relevant, you're going to have to reinvent yourself. You're going to have to embrace this idea of nonlinear growth that looks more like a hockey stick versus the truck ramp. In that hockey stick, a few incredible relationships like Seidl, like Keegan, become an enabler of your growth, become an enabler of you remaining relevant. And in the book, I give you a roadmap. I give you a blueprint on exactly how to do that. So it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Target and Walmart and our website. But again, the book is called Curvebenders. It's out this week. And I'm elated. Seidl endorsed it. Keegan, I can sell that endorsement on T-shirts and do well. But that's all about book. Seidl, you also have, you call it the no-brainer on the sales community sign-up?
Yes. So for those watching, those watch afterwards, so I call it a no-brainer 30-day free trial. Just go to salescommunity.com. You put it on. If you want to cancel afterwards, I'm not offended, but obviously we do it because people go to it and stay on and take the time to navigate through lots of great event, lots of great contents. One of my favorite things you can do is search. You can type in LinkedIn, and then a whole bunch of great content comes up around, hey, how can you leverage LinkedIn to sell more? And there's things, whether you're individual contributor, SDR, to CRO, CEO. So please check out salescommunity.com.
Keegan, we want to end this on a high note. If there was one thing the sales community can do, and Seidl lives this, right? If there's one thing we could do to help you, what can the sales community do to help you? How can be an asset to you?
More MQLs.
We have a fix there. I will be following. I want to talk about that as soon as we get.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm a proud card-carrying founding advisory board member of Sales Community, and I think it is. You're hitting the nail on the head. It's those relationships. It's identifying some folks that you can really lean on to advance your career. And I would actually turn it around. I think folks should think about a give first approach. So sign up, join these communities, and you may not even realize, it's a slow creep of building expertise. You have more to give than you realize at any stage of your career. Offer that up, help people, give first, and you'll be amazed at what comes back to you.
That's a great note to end this on. For our audience, you've been listening to Tech Sales Insights Live. Please check out our podcast. We have Mary Beth Vasello, VP and General Manager of North America for NextThink. Steve Fitz is the CRO of Sumo Logic. We've got Dan Wright, CEO of Data Robot. John McCarthy, Mainline Infosystem. Some great folks coming up. So check out salescommunity.com/podcast. A lot of great content, resources, and relationships in the sales community. So come join us. On behalf of Randy, Seidl, Keegan, thank you. Thanks for being our guest.
Great. Thanks.
See
Thanks
you
so much for having me.
next Wednesday, same time, noon Eastern. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.